All right, welcome back, guys. So in this video, we're now going to move on to start talking about more about the kind of structure of your intentions in more detail. I think last video I said that we were going to talk about something else, but I forgot we actually had some other topics in the book. So I'm going to go over those. We're going to look a little bit more into the structure of your intentions, specifically related to the command component. Just to go over this first point, it says the absolute response of the subconscious is primarily determined by the command component of the intention, right? So basically what I mean by that is the subject part of your intention. So remember we said that's two parts. So it has the subject part, which is the point of focus. That's going to be useful for subconscious memory. So we haven't talked about that yet, but that's very important when it comes to the memory component. We're not really going over that yet. The subject is one part. And the second part of your intention is the command part. So that's the part that's important to us right now. So what the subconscious is responding to, or its absolute response. So the response that God programmed into it is primarily related to the command part, not the subject part. So just as an example, let's say that I want to feel like the love frequency. So I like a girl, right? I'm in love with her. I can be in love with a million different chicks, right? So it's not going to matter who it is. Could be Lily, could be Amy, could be Rebecca, whoever, right? No matter who it is, my subconscious is going to respond the exact same way if the command component is the same, right? So if I feel the love emotion for this girl, right, and I perceive my perceptions altered in a way native to the love frequency, I have to produce the command component that matches the love frequency that God has designated to be assigned to the love frequency. So again, the relationship between intention and the absolute response of your subconscious depends on the command part, not the subject part. Subject could be anything you want it to be. For the body, we did talk about how the subject is important when it comes to the sexual emotion, but that has to do with your body, not your mind. Your mind is subject. As far as I know, I don't really know of any. Exceptions, right? It's always the command part that matters. So that's mainly what we're going to be looking at here. Now, to go to this next point, the intentional commands can express themselves in three different ways. So when I use the term express, right? Basically, we could word it another way and say that embedded in every tension, or embedded in every intention, right, is a subject component of the intention and a command component, right? So now the command component will say something. It'll assert some type of command. Now we've been wording it that way up until now, but now we're going to get a little more specific about what commands can do, because commands. It's not as simple as they just assert something, kind of like you would use just a regular written English sentence, right? So a person asserts this, right, or commands this. It's a little bit more complicated than that, right? So I like to use the term express. So the command component expresses something, right? It expresses a command in a different way. And so to kind of really go over that, we're going to go over these three. So the command component of your intention can express itself in three different forms. So it can express desire, it can express a concrete command, or it can express an abstract command. So we're going to go over what each of those means. So the first one, when the command component expresses desire, what that basically means is that it expresses some desire of the conscious mind. Now, that's really the way intention is normally used. So when you say someone intends to do something, usually what you mean is the command component of their intention is expressing the desire to do something. That's the most common way it's used, but it's actually not the only way that the command component expresses itself. But it can express a desire. So let's say I'm holding this next point. Let's say I'm holding the intention to win a sports game, right? If I want to win a sports game and I'm holding the intention to win it, the command component of my intention is saying, basically, I will win, or win this game, or I'm going to win this game no matter what happens. And let's say I just keep asserting that intention in my mind. I will win, will win, will win, right? That's expressing a desire, right? So the command component is expressing a desire to win. Now, you could say that, well, desire sounds like an emotion, and according to the theory, emotions come from the subconscious, right? Understood, but that's not the way I'm using desire in this context. So yes, in that case, desire represents a kind of a frequency based on wanting something. It alters your perception in a certain way. It has a certain emotional feeling. But that's not really how I'm using it in this case. So in this case, desire is just a type of an expression of your conscious mind's command, right? It's not necessarily in itself related to any specific emotion, right? It's just a way of describing the conscious mind's thoughts. So when the conscious mind wants something, which is completely devoid of the emotion of desire, has really discussed in terms of the subconscious, this is just expresses something you want, right? So similarly, if I hold the intention to support a friend, right? I want to be there for them. I want to help them when they need it, or try to lift them up when they're down. That the command component of my intention will express desire to help, right? So that's the most common one. That one is probably very intuitive. Now, the second one is the concrete component. So that one's probably a little less intuitive. So what does it mean to say the command component of your intention expresses a concrete parameter or expresses itself concretely? Well, in the book I give an example, which I'll just kind of go over quickly here. To kind of understand what a concrete expression of a command is, it's good to basically consider the example of I would like you guys, and you guys can go do it along with me. I would like you guys to just we're going to basically run a test of your imagination, right? So I want you guys to hold the image of an apple, right, in your head. So yeah, I want you guys to hold the image in your head for a couple of seconds. Counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah, just hold the image in your head. Remember that image, and then we'll move on. So basically, I want you to think of the image that came in your head, and then try to think about what the color of the apple was, right? So for most people, the color was probably red, right? But for some people, the color would have been green, and other people would be the outliers, right? It would be some other color. Right, and that's basically the end of the exercise for the most part. And it was very easy to hold the it's very easy to hold the image of the apple in your head. But I want you to think about some other things now about the image that appeared in your mind, right? What was the apple sitting on, right? Was it just suspended in air? Was it on a table? Was it in a fruit basket, right? Was it on the ground, right? Where was it? What did the background of the image you held in your head look like? For me, it was just a black background. But was it some other background? Was it colorful? Was it one color? Was it a place in the real world that you might know, a park or a kitchen, right? What was the apple sitting in, right? Was it in a fruit basket or something? The sharpness of the apple. Was it sharp, or was it a little blurry? Was it close up or far away? Was it high or low, right? You probably didn't think about those things that much, right, when you were just trying to hold the image of the apple, but those things all came into your mind. But where did they come from? Who put them there if all you were trying to do is think of an apple? Well, all of those parameters, the sharpness of the apple, the sharpness or blurriness of the apple, how close up it was or how far away it was, how high or low it was, how left or right, the background, everything, all of that was actually expressed by the command component of your attention too. Now in that case, the command component expressed dimension, right? So it expressed itself in physical parameters. So when your intention makes an assertion or a command, it can also express those types of details too, not just a desire. So for example, and I think I bring it here. Yeah, so just to read over this point, as a concrete example is what I mean here. If I it's basically when you hold the intention to imagine things that basically provide an experience that's associated with the five senses, right? So in other words, if I imagine a song in my head, so if I just play a song in my head, which is easy to do, right? My command component, my intention is expressing sound or it's expressing music, right? If I touch a surface in my mind and imagine what it feels like as I'm touching it, then it's expressing texture, right? So all of these, when I do that in my mind, that's not just happening on its own. My intention is expressing itself in a specific way, right, to result in that perception. Oh, I forgot one other thing. We haven't talked about, to understand this in more detail, we basically have to revisit some of what we talked about in chapter 5 regarding the new framework that we've been using for the positive mind and negative mind, right? So remember that I said, excuse me, I ate a little bit. So remember what I said, that in the new framework, the negative mind and the positive mind aren't entirely analogous to the conscious mind and the subconscious, right? They're technically, both minds work together to pull off negative mind abilities, and both minds work together to pull off positive or transcendental abilities, right? So now when you're using this, right, when I want to imagine an apple in my head, that's a negative mind ability. So remember what I said is that that's ability your conscious mind uses when your subconscious is in its ground state. So when it's in its ground state, which is when it's charged up by the body, right, it is still responding to my intention of the conscious mind, right? When my conscious mind produces intention, it does still get quantized to a specific frequency, but it's mostly functioning through the commands of your body, right? And what happens is your body makes it so that when you produce a certain intention, let's say holding an apple in your mind, your subconscious responds so quickly and so easily to listen to that command, right? So if I want to hold the image of an apple, my subconscious reads that command, and then it responds by altering my perception to see the image of an apple in my head. So that's why I can do it very quickly. I can do it instantaneously. It requires no effort with charging. I can do it as much as I want to. So that's a negative mind ability, right? But that's mostly coming from the subconscious functioning as a result of the body charging it. So basically the body makes the subconscious function so quickly, right, that you wouldn't even realize that it's a separate part of your awareness, which is, there's your conscious mind and then your subconscious. So it's a separate part of your awareness that's actually doing all the work to when you imagine an apple, right? It doesn't seem like it, right? It just seems like it's your regular everyday mind, but it isn't, right? Your conscious mind is just providing the command. The subconscious one is actually the one doing all the work, but the body does such a good job in commanding the subconscious to be ready to basically serve the conscious mind to pull off negative mind or normal abilities, that it's so seamless, it doesn't seem like it's another mind doing the work. But that means, basically, if it feels like that, that means you got a good brain that's doing its job, right? Of course, the downside to that, like we said, is that your negative mind abilities are going to be limited, but they're very easy to use and always provide you with a base level of performance. So yeah, I just felt I needed to explain that. So when I imagine an apple, or I imagine music playing in my head, or touching a surface, or if I imagine a smell in my mind, right? So I'm using my negative mind to pull off these abilities, but my subconscious is still responding in a way that alters my perception to see those things. And my commanding part of my intention, like when I do this, my intention is not saying see apple, right? At least in terms of speaking on what the intention is doing. The intention is expressing physical dimensions. There's really no way to kind of say what it's doing in words, right? This is purely a metaphysical expression, right? So now the third part, the abstract command component, right? So the command component of your intention can also express itself in an abstract way. So abstract expressions generally have to do with relationships. They can express information too. I don't really want to go over that now. That's more related to memory, but I think the more important one is relationships. So what does that mean? Well, I think is a very subtle behavior of the subconscious, which I think most people don't realize, is when you perceive a relationship in the real world, even that requires a frequency. So even that requires your subconscious to switch to a frequency, alter your perception to perceive that relationship. So as an example, let's say that someone is a good friend, right? You look at someone and you say, oh, those people are good friends, right? You generally notice that when you think of two people as being really good friends, you feel it, right? There's a certain emotional feeling that comes with that. You don't quite feel the emotion of joy, right? You don't feel inner peace. It's a positive emotion, but it's not those positive emotions. It's not like gratitude, right? It's something else, right? It's just a feeling that you always have when you see that people are good friends. That's the emotion associated with friendship, right? Or the friendship relationship. So that's something that's very important to remember. Relationships also have their own emotional or their own subconscious frequency. So they have their own emotion. They have their own the way your subconscious compels your mind or alters your perception. They have certain creative components to them. So yeah, in you not only that, you have to be on that frequency in order to perceive the relationship. So for example, if I see two people, right, and they're good friends, I can't see them as actual friends or perceive them as friends until my subconscious is on the friendship frequency. It's impossible. For example, right now, there are a million different relationships in the world, right, that are possible that I'm not perceiving right now, right? So there's, so in that moment, there is the relationship of student-teacher, right, or master-teacher, right? There's relationship of father-son, mother-daughter, boss and coworker, right? Really any relationship you could think of. There could be two strangers on the street, or two people who are best friends, or there could be enemies, right? Or government and citizen. Any relationship you can think of, right? In other words, all those relationships were relationships that I'm not thinking of. I wasn't thinking of the previous moment. I couldn't perceive them until I thought of them. And when I thought of them, I produced a specific type of intention. The command component of that intention expressed the relationship that I spoke about. And only when I expressed that relationship did my subconscious switch to a frequency, so it had its own emotion, and it altered my perception to be capable of perceiving that relationship. So I can't perceive two people as being enemies until my subconscious switches to what you might just call the enemy frequency. Now I can see them as enemies. Now when I look at them, I say, oh, they're enemies. And that, when you see two people as enemies, it also has an emotional feeling, right? It's a negative feeling, but it's still a specific emotional feeling. So when you get used to controlling your subconscious, you're going to notice these things more, right? You're going to notice that every relationship does have a specific emotion associated, right? And it follows all these principles. So this is very important, right? Because when you're learning to control your subconscious, you're going to learn what type of relationships. Oh, actually, before I even get to that, let's go over this next point. So, the reason I'm going over all these things, or the reason I'm talking about the three type of command expressions of the command component, is that the subconscious has an absolute response to all three command components, right? So, in other words, and we kind of already gave it away, but so in the previous video, I basically said that God basically programmed the subconscious to have a specific response to specific expressions of intention, right? Well, that is true all the way down to these three command types. So if I express a certain desire, God will have matched up that desire with a specific subconscious frequency. That determines what my transcendental abilities will be on that frequency, including my emotion. God made sure that certain expressions, concrete expressions. So when I express dimensions, when I imagine certain physical things in my mind, whether it be images or sounds or types of touch, right? Those also get matched up to certain subconscious frequencies, right? So I have to be on that frequency to imagine that sound. I have to be on that frequency to visualize certain things. And also relations, or the abstract component. So if I want to imagine a specific relationship or perceive it, my subconscious has to switch to a certain frequency. Or God paired up that relationship with that frequency. Right, so these are very important in learning to control your subconscious, because when you know, like, mainly concrete components, it isn't usually too important in my opinion. I mean, no, it is, to be fair, it is because of the music, and I always charge with music. We'll talk a little more about that later. But the relationship part is very, very, very important, and we're also going to talk about that in the next video more. But when you're learning to control your subconscious, the desire and your relationship parts are very, very, very important in learning to control your subconscious. Like I said, every frequency has a learning curve. So if you want to charge a specific emotion or get used to charging your subconscious at a certain frequency, you're going to get used to knowing what type of desires and relationships and even concrete components help to keep your subconscious at that frequency so it could charge up at that frequency. But basically every frequency you're going to have to study a little bit to learn how to get used to what you basically learn what expressions of intention charge it. Excuse me, my camera cut off. So, like I was saying, you basically have to learn each frequency down to its command components, right? So, just to go into an example, so I already talked about music. So, actually, before I get into music, let's say a more simple one. So when I was, I remember many years ago, right? When I was learning to charge my subconscious, so I was learning to do all this, right? I had a goal, right? And I just kept charging my subconscious to basically at the ambition and confidence frequency. So I just kept charging it, charging my belief, saying I'm going to accomplish this goal no matter what. I'm achieve it, I'm achieve it, I'm achieve it. And it just, I could feel it. It kept charging. So it became more and more and more intense, right? And so I felt the emotion of determination, confidence, and ambition. I felt it so powerfully. It was like amazing. It was an amazing feeling, right? But what I noticed that was interesting, right, is I don't know why, I kept perceiving this like kind of yellow color in my mind. And it happens every time I charge that frequency. So it wasn't like one time. It happened every time I charge it like that, I just start perceiving yellow. I don't know why. It's almost like a kind of goldish yellow color, right? And what that kind of told me was that for whatever reason, I think yellow is strongly associated with the emotion of confidence or ambition, right? So I think that's innate. So in other words, if I simply imagine the color yellow, I'll have an easier time charging up at the ambition frequency. Now, why that is, don't know, but I do know to a degree, at least I believe. Basically, God, as far as according to this theory, God would have associated that color with the confidence or ambition frequency. So that's just how it is. Like blue, certain shades of blue can be matched to different frequencies, so the shade's important too. But I feel like blue helps me to charge a feeling of peace or inner peace, right? So each color is different. Same thing with music. So when my conscious mind, when I hear music in my mind, right, or my intention expresses music, which is a concrete expression, right, that requires my subconscious to switch to certain frequencies. So, and that's that. By the way, that's true all the way down to music's different parameters. So the tempo of the music, which you can even say the tempo might be an abstract component, but down to the sound, like let's say I play a melody, right? If I play a melody on a guitar, it'll provoke or stimulate a certain emotion within me compared to playing that same exact melody at the exact volume in the exact same octave, right? If I play it on the piano, it'll give a slightly different emotional feeling. The frequency changes just a little bit. Why? Because, I'm imagining this in my mind, because I have to be on a different frequency to be able to perceive for both sounds in my mind, right? So even music can affect your subconscious frequency. And we're going to talk a lot more about that when we talk about how entertainment works. But for now, just know that if I want to play a guitar sound in my head or a piano sound or a flute sound or whatever, right, my subconscious has to switch to a unique frequency as determined by God to be able to hear that sound in my mind. Same with touching things, same with smelling things, right? So those are the concrete parameters. And we already went over the relationships, but for the most part, like I said, relationships are also have their associated frequencies as determined by God. A good one that I talk about in the book is being a hero, right? So if you want to be a hero, if you want to save people and do good things, right? Now, your subconscious tells you that's a positive frequency. So your subconscious tells you that's a positive frequency, right? And when your subconscious switches to the hero frequency, you're able to perceive someone as saving the day and then someone who's in danger. And you're able to perceive the relationship between the hero and the villain, right? And so to perceive those kinds of relationships, right, you have to be on the right frequency. So as you can tell, God made it so that the hero frequency is a positive frequency because you feel good when you're on that frequency, right? When you see someone, when your intention asserts a relationship of bully, right? So, or villain. Let's say you're in search relationship or villain where you're the villain and you're hurting someone and you see yourself as the villain, which to be fair, most evil people don't do that, but we'll talk more about how that stuff works later, how morality works. But let's say you perceive yourself as a villain, then you're going to feel, or it doesn't even have to be you, it could just be two other people. There's a villain, there's Joker, he's trying to kill some innocent civilian or something, right? So when you perceive that, your intention, or when you think of it in your mind, right, your intention goes to the villain frequency. God made it so that the villain frequency feels bad. So whatever your intention expresses, right, has a relationship between this person and this person. And of course, to do that, I should say that now, it requires information. Well, we'll get to a little bit of that in the next video. But it requires information describing the villain's characteristics, right, his personality type, things like that. So that's included in this information part of the abstract expression of commands, right? So, that command component will express the information describing the characters, and it'll also express the relationship they have with each other. And like I said, God made it so that villain frequency feels bad, the hero frequency feels good. So, I think that's it. This last part, I think we'll more or less talk about that in the next video. But, so yeah, I know it's kind of a lot, but this is kind of important, right, to think about when you're controlling your subconscious. So it's going to be important to think about it down to these three components. So once again, the subject doesn't really matter for your subconscious. You can focus on a million different subjects, and what determines that's going to determine, that's going to be related to your subconscious memory, which is basically what we talked about regarding association. So that's going to determine what your subconscious energy is associated with, which we'll talk more about that in chapter 9 and 10. But the command component is going to determine the quantization, right? So that's important right now. So that's going to determine how your subconscious charges and what it can do when it charges. So it's going to be important for the command component. It's going to be important how the command component expresses itself in terms of desire, down to concrete expressions, and down to abstract expressions. So yeah, that's it. Like I said, there's a lot. If it's still a little tricky, right, then you can just rather read the information on the website, so I worded it a little differently, or in the book, or just rewatch the video. In the next video, actually, yes, we're going to talk about some of the stuff again, but we're talking about it in a way that's a little bit easier. So you're not going to generally think in terms of these three expressions all the time. It's going to be a little bit easier just thinking things in terms of what I call the context, right? So yeah, I'll see that next video. I'll make a next video, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.